Mic test.
Maybe just let people. Oh, there's Richard. Maybe just let people maybe announce that we're going to get started in a couple minutes.
Mic test. A. Mic test. A.
Are we going to be able to see the Hi, everybody. We'll get started in a few minutes, so please feel free to take a seat. Yes.
Make it a little louder.
Try.
Oh, so you do. You're the best.
Mic test. A. Mic.
All right. Thank you so much for. Oh my God! Thank you guys for. And here's the clickers. I'll just move it to you. Yeah. Okay. Hi. No, not at all. Right. Hi. Hi. We are. I mean, something sort of kind of planning out. Do you guys want to, should we get rolling? Okay. Are you going to stand up here or just come up for your slides? Okay. So pregnant.
Oh, if you could say, oh, well, you may pick up a common form at the table on the rails and leave it in the bin.
Okay.
I would write it down.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. So I know everyone's probably pretty comfortable in their seats, but we were thinking it's a smaller group tonight. If you feel comfortable, we'd love folks to kind of come a little bit closer, and we'll plan to have a kind of smaller group conversation. So I'll give everyone a minute, if you so please. And just a quick safety note. In the event of an emergency, the exits are behind us. Please file out calmly and carefully. And also, there's restrooms in this facility down the corridor to the right. All right. So I think we are pretty good to go. So good evening. Thank you all for coming out tonight. My name is Alexandra Markevich. I'm the Deputy Director of the Bus Modernization Program at the MBTA. And I'm really excited to be here tonight. I'm actually going to be presenting alongside Diana Fernandez, the Deputy Chief of Urban Design at the BPDA, and Yasha Franklin Hodge, the Chief of Streets from the City of Boston. And we're here to talk about our revised proposal for 15% design for the new Arborway facility. For our bus maintenance facility and our plan to electrify 200 buses at the MBTA. Let me get used to these. Okay. So tonight I'll start with an overview of what are the benefits of this project. Then we'll talk about where we are with the concept for the new facility. And then the city will have an opportunity to talk through some of the city components of that proposal. And then we'll wrap up with a discussion of the timeline and next steps. So just taking a step back to the big picture, through this project, we are supporting the electrification of the full bus fleet of the MBTA. And we have a target to electrify all of our buses by 2040. This is actually one of the most aggressive timelines in the nation, though many other systems are starting to set deadlines. In order to get there, we need to construct a new facility with fully electric charging infrastructure every 2 to 3 years between now and 2040. This is a massive investment that we will be making in our bus system. And we did set this target a few years ago, but in the summer of 2022, the state legislature came in and really codified this plan by requiring that the MBTA buy only zero-emissions buses after 2029 and fully electrify its fleet by 2040. So this is now mandated by the state legislature that we meet these important climate targets. The project at Arborway is a really critical component of this plan. What we're proposing to do is to replace our bus facility there that has 118 compressed natural gas buses with a larger facility with 200 battery electric buses. And what we're able to do with that larger facility is electrify not only the routes here in green that currently operate out of the Arborway facility, but also pull in additional routes that serve transit-critical communities in Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan that are illustrated in blue on this map. So that's a really important part of this project. And not only do we need it in place in order to meet the mandate of 2029 for only buying electric buses, but we also want to make sure that all this new charging infrastructure is in place ahead of the 2028-2029 planned retirement of those compressed natural gas buses, because we don't want to have to replace those with CNGs right before the deadline. So this is a schedule-driven project, and it's really important that we're able to accomplish that. In addition to the electrification benefits, we're also expanding the capacity at this facility for 60-foot buses. And that allows us to move over some existing routes that run on 60-footers, like the number 28 up and down Blue Hill Ave and the 39 here in JP. But it also can allow us to upgrade routes that have high ridership and often have crowding, like the number 32 that goes up and down Hyde Park Ave. At the end of this project, 40% of the bus service in Boston will be electric, including all service in neighborhoods of Jamaica Plain, Mattapan, Rosendale, and Hyde Park. We really cannot overstate the importance of increasing the bus capacity for transit-critical communities to 200 buses. We know that by bringing in those additional routes, we're extending the electrification and tailpipe benefits of electric buses to environmental justice communities that have higher rates of poverty and have higher rates of asthma and stroke. So with this type of project, we are extending the benefits to the communities that need it the most. And frankly, we're just investing in the bus system that these communities rely on every day. So shifting gears a little bit, we want to talk about some of the site constraints that I think many of you are well aware of that we have to contemplate when we're thinking about replacing this facility. So this is a map of the two parcels that the MBTA owns at Arborway. One is at 3600 Washington Street and the other is 500 Arborway. These are kind of across from Forest Hills for anyone who's not familiar. Kitty corner from Forest Hills. So first and foremost, our existing bus facility, which was originally constructed as a temporary facility in 2002, is located at 3600 Washington Street. And we know that during the construction of the new facility, we have to maintain operations of that existing facility so that we can keep running bus service. Secondly, between the two parcels, we have the Stony Brook Conduit, which is owned and operated by BWSC. And so we have to avoid building directly on top of this culvert so the BWSC can maintain access in the case of, maintenance needs or other types of issues that come. Third, we have the city-owned former pole yard, which is critical to their public works department functions, including snow and ice operations in the winter, and we have to keep that in mind as we're rethinking through the new design for the site. And then we also have on the southern boundary of the site, the Emerald Necklace Connector. Oh, I forgot that I have a laser pointer. Emerald Necklace Connector, which was built during the Casey Overpass project, and we know that this needs to be maintained intact as a DCR property through the design of the new facility. And then looping back around, we also know that the area along Washington Street has always been targeted for community uses in the permanent configuration of the bus facility, and so we are keeping that in mind. So we were all here, many of us were here. Many of us were here 4 months ago in June when we presented a proposal that we felt like optimized all of the operational requirements and the community benefits, as well as responded to some of those site constraints. We proposed a 2-level indoor bus facility that for housing and maintaining 200 buses. We spanned over the Stony Brook Conduit at a 2nd level to accommodate that need. And we kept the public works function largely intact to address their programmatic requirements. And then we were able to open up 6.82 acres for community uses, the narrowest portion of which was a 160-foot depth parcel from Washington Street. But we know that there were a lot of concerns. I think we heard them in June, and then we heard them through subsequent opportunities throughout the summer. And we heard a lot of different things, but 3 things really rose to the top that we heard very consistently. The first was that there was not 8 acres for community uses, and that was a key priority that we had missed. The second was that the size of the building was just too big, it's too much. And then thirdly, relatedly, was that the size of the building and the fact that the buses crossed over the Emerald Necklace connector meant for a lesser experience along that Emerald Necklace connection and not an appropriate treatment of the Arborway edge. So what we did is we worked together in collaboration with the city to take a step back and rethink how can we rethink the needs and uses on this site to be responsive to these comments. So we've spent some time, and we are ensuring that this new concept does meet, first and foremost, the 8 acres that we heard loud and clear was a priority. So we will spend the rest of this presentation going over the revised concept that is responsive to what we heard. So we heard you. And I'll spend a little bit of time on this side. So we knew 8 acres was a very key priority and that we had to use the site more efficiently in order to open up 8 acres for community uses. So in order to get there, we did 3 main things. And so I'll walk through those as a way to walk through this new concept. The first thing we did is we reduced the physical size of the bus facility and the footprint while maintaining the capacity for 200 buses. And we did that by actually storing the buses on the surface in an open-air, canopy-covered configuration. And what this does is it allows us to use the site much more efficiently because we can go over the area where the Stony Brook conduit is, and we also don't have to dedicate as much space for ramping and circulation. We maintained the bus maintenance building as a fully indoor facility to meet our operational needs, and that's largely intact, similar to the concept that we presented in June, but we've been able to shift it. Absolutely, sorry about that, great point. Ooh. Okay, so this is that bus storage area that has a dashed line around it where you can see the canopy would be covering. And you can see the Stony Brook conduit under here. So it's an open air, kind of like a carport situation. The maintenance building is still going to be intact as an indoor repair facility, and it has a very similar program and layout to what we presented in June, but it's shifted over to the east. And we were able to do that because we worked with the city of Boston, who identified a modified programmatic requirement to meet their public works need on a half an acre. And we were able to work with them to relocate it in a portion of the site that was going to allow for a much more efficient organization of the site. And then finally, we learned from what the Urban Land Institute's Technical Assistance Program had been looking at and recommended. And we heard from them that it was going to be much more efficient to accommodate employee parking on a shared structure with the community uses. Frankly, it would be more efficient in terms of space and also likely more kind of a more economic way to provide for that parking need. So what we're proposing is that 150 employee spaces would be accommodated in an integrated parking facility that also meets the needs of that community use facility. And then finally, we wanted this concept to be responsive to the interest in improving the Arborway. And so we expanded the frontage available in the 8 acres along the Arborway to 660 feet by removing the access point for buses that we had proposed initially to be there. And we've moved that access point to be along Washington Street, along 2 public access roadways that would serve both the 8 acres as well as our facility and operate very similar to how bus access operates today at our facility, where there's 2 access points along Washington Street. In this configuration, the buses would enter the facility at the southernmost point. Oh, I think I'm losing. Oh, there we go. Enter more at the southern point and exit at the northern point that would also serve as access for a small number of employees as well as delivery and services. those service deliveries would still use a loading dock in the maintenance facility and exit at Forest Hill Street, turning right onto the Arborway. We're still planning on having a second level on the indoor maintenance facility that would accommodate our backup operations control center and some bus facility administrative and support spaces. But you'll notice the second level actually doesn't even take up the full size of the first level, so there is a significant setback here from that Arborway edge. And then above the canopy for where the buses are stored, we'd have a very small, relatively small head house for charging equipment, as well as plenty of space for solar. So in terms of the size of the building, we wanted to really demonstrate the change in what we're proposing. The original proposal from June had a 60-foot tall building that was spanning nearly the entirety of the site. What we're proposing now not only shifts the whole facility eastward away from Washington Street, but it's also reducing the height by 35 feet for a significant portion of it. And then for the indoor maintenance facility, we do have a little more height in certain places, but that's set back from the Arborway. And here's a before and after that really gets a sense of this change in scale, and it's pretty dramatic. And then finally, we wanted to end on the point about the Arborway edge. So in addition to eliminating the bus access across the pedestrian and bicycle facilities here and expanding the area for community use along this edge, we've also actually increased the landscape buffer along our edge on our property by 35% to allow for some more greenery that can be kind of a better user experience for those biking and walking along that edge. So with that, I would love to pass it to Diana, who's going to talk a little bit more about what the city's taken a look at in terms of the 8 acres.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. I'm going to grab the little slide deck. So we're super excited to be here with you today, joined here by Yasha with the Streets Cabinet and myself with the BPDA Urban Design team. So building off of a lot of the wonderful work that came from the MBTA, we wanted to think a little bit more deeply about the community use land and specifically understand what the process is for those 8 acres. And the one thing that I want to call out here is that there's been extensive planning and community advocacy for the use of those 8 acres over many years. There's many different plans, including the Plan JP Rocks, the Forest Hills Improvements Plan. I mean, so many different planning efforts that we are really looking to build upon. In addition to that, I think our goal as a city is to ensure that as a next step in looking at these 8 acres in greater detail is digging further with the community, understanding what the priorities are for program, for different uses on the site, and also look at how that can modernize the planning that had been done to date to update it with current priorities, and also ensure that that prepares us for a disposition process which would follow the construction of the facility. A key part of that is, I think, sharing with you all, what next steps would be on this. So this framework here lays out a similar sort of process that we've done for other sites that we've done through our real estate department and our disposition process. And I want to share that with you today. So one of the first things that we do as part of that process is ensuring that we understand what the vision and goals are for those 8 acres. Really getting a sense of, how does the previous planning relate to our current needs today? What needs to be reevaluated? What are new sort of programmatic needs that we want to bring into consideration and prioritize through the development of that site? In addition to that sort of visioning and goal setting exercise, we then translate those goals into sort of feasibility scenarios, taking a look at what is possible on the site, how can we take all of those goals and look at different development scenarios that allow us to assess what are the trade-offs that one would have, whether we prioritize X or Z through that planning process. And then that really does prepare us for the drafting and review of the RFP. This has been done through a sort of community process. There would be an advisory community board that helps to shape the draft of that RFP. In that RFP, we would include, programmatic considerations, established design guidelines, any developer requirements that would go through that disposition, as well as the selection criteria associated with that work. And then finally, we would also have the community be with us in facilitating the selection of the developer that would help to execute that vision in the long term. So we are sharing this with you today because this is the sort of next steps for how we would think about the use of those 8 acres. But we did want to respond to a lot of the feedback that we had heard from the community in those past meetings about those 8 acres really being able to meet a lot of the previous planning. So what we did is we started to put together some scenarios that took into account a lot of the sort of planning considerations and parameters associated with the planned JP Rocks work. So what you're seeing here on this slide is a 3-dimensional representation of the bus facility that the T provided to us and that we worked together on. And superimposed on that is what we are taking from the JP Rocks plan and ensuring that we have the capacity for on this site. So the first item is that in looking at the 8 acres, we are still able to accommodate the 980 units that were identified in the JP Rocks plan through the site. So we certainly have that capacity, and that capacity is being met both with the heights and densities that had been associated with the JP Rocks plan. In addition to that, this plan also includes significant open space. As Alexandra mentioned, there's a real opportunity for us to build upon the Emerald Necklace connection here, Olmsted's vision for this area of our neighborhood, and ensure that we can expand open space both on the Arborway and certainly on the interior of the site. In addition to that, we also heard loud and clear that improvements along Washington Street are something that we wanted to make sure that the 8 acres could accommodate and couldn't preclude. So what you're seeing here, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a while, is our ability to still accommodate those improvements that had been envisioned as part of the JP Rocks plan. And then finally, a newer sort of development that we heard was that there was also a desire to ensure that this program, these 8 acres, could meet a more new sort of request for use on the site, which is a retail component or a grocer component on site. And through our analysis, we were able to achieve approximately, I think, 16 to 17,000 square foot retail component as part of that development, in addition to the residential units and ground floor retail. So that's something that we were excited to discover was possible here. And then, as Alexandra mentioned, I think this plan, we were really excited by a lot of the work that came out of the ULI TAP process and the great feedback we received through that. And one of those was really looking at the sort of co-locating of the parking to facilitate the efficiency of the site and certainly deliver better results. And the way we're doing that here is both through podium options for parking as well as underground opportunities. And what you can see here on the site is that we still, with all of these improvements, are retaining these opportunities for open space. So where you see number 2 here is a site we're excited about and certainly want to make sure that as we think about the sort of disposition and RFP process I mentioned earlier, all of these considerations will be brought forward and go through its community process to ensure that these are in alignment. But we do think that based on the JP Rocks plan and some of the planning effort that's happened in the past, additional open space on the Arborway is something that we've heard loud and clear before, and this could be a really neat opportunity to add some active programming, play spaces, like an actual destination there on the Arborway that enhances this location. In addition to that, we've also been very strategic in looking at ways in which to consolidate the public works facility and ensure that we are still meeting those programmatic needs, and Yasha will chat with you all about that in a second. But this does allow us to allow for significant buffers between the bus facility and the development site, as well as sort of new open space opportunities. So I'm going to hand it over to Yasha, who's going to chat a little bit about this public works facility.
Thank you, Diana. Hi, everybody. Yasha Franklin Hodge, Chief of Streets for the city. So I wear a couple of hats in a meeting like this. One is looking at the needs and the land requirements for our public works facilities, making sure that we have the locations we need and the places we need them to be able to do the winter maintenance work that we do every year. And as I think, those of you who have been involved in this process for, in some cases decades will know that a good chunk of the land here has been historically for, at least 60 years a public works facility. In, I believe, 2013, 2014, the primary use of that facility, which was the city's street lighting operation, was temporarily relocated to a location on Canterbury Street. It's still there on a temporary facility in order to allow for some or all of that space to be made part of the larger Arborway Bus project. In the intervening years, as we've developed out and evolved our snow program, as we've added additional equipment, we've found the need for an additional site. And so for the last 4 or 5 years, this site has also served as a winter salt distribution facility. In its current configuration, it's an open air facility. In any future state, it would be covered. We do not intend to have an open salt pile in a permanent condition for this. And what this facility does is it allows us to much more nimbly serve Jamaica Plain, Mattapan, Roslindale, the hilly areas on the south of the city. Our public works yards to the north and to the east are more or less at capacity, which means that without a facility in this general vicinity, we would be bringing trucks from the very southern end of Hyde Park or West Roxbury to do an extended round trip in order to provide salt for the facility, or for the streets surrounding the facility in this area. So this reconfiguration sort of really looks at the minimum footprint that we need in order to be able to maintain a salt operation, and working with the T to figure out how to place it in such a way that it can make shared use of their own exit gate onto Forest Hill Street to sort of reduce the impact on the streets here. We have also, as I think some of you know, are in the process of building out one or more what we call CHARMs. This is a Center for Hard to Recycle Materials, but it's essentially a facility that can allow drop-off of materials that would otherwise not be recyclable at the curbside. So, this could be anything from a can of latex paint to textiles or electronics, paper shredding, things that we don't collect curbside. The city of Boston, like many cities around the country, is working to add permanent staffed drop-off facilities. These are not storage, these are collection points from which stuff is trucked to an appropriate recycling facility. We have identified Arborway as a potentially ideal location for one of these facilities because of its transit proximity and its central location. And so, in addition to serving as a salt facility in the winter, we are exploring the feasibility of doing a seasonal charm here so that when we do not need salt, we would clean out the covered facility and have a small-scale location where people could come and do drop-offs without having to drive to West Roxbury, which is what we normally ask of folks. So that's kind of the public works piece of this. The other hat that I wear in my job is thinking about the design of the streets. And one of the things that we're very excited about with this work, and with great credit to Diana and her team for the analysis that they've done, is that with these 8 acres, in addition to the building potential and the open space potential, we have the potential to make for a much safer, much more multimodal, much more pleasant Washington Street along the facility edge. This is, or along the edge of the community use land, I should say. These are hypothetical cross-sections. So we have, in the planning process that, that Diana laid out, we will talk a great deal about the needs of the community along Washington Street. We'll look at different options for street layout. But this is really here just to illustrate the fact that, with the additional width we could pick up, we have the potential to do things like add separated bicycle lanes. We have the potential to greatly improve the bus experience for people who are actually taking the bus from this location with boarding platforms. We have the ability to add trees and other kinds of green infrastructure along this path. So this layout and this 8-acre configuration gives us quite a bit more flexibility and for us to work with as we work with the community to figure out what this should look like.
Awesome. And just to wrap it up in terms of next steps, sorry about that. So we've laid out a schedule that will support us meeting the legislative mandate and the retirement, be ahead of the retirement of the compressed natural gas buses. What we're proposing is finalizing this concept in terms of the 15% level over the next couple months, and then moving into the final design phase, which will require awarding a contract to a new designer. We'll also look to bring on a construction manager during the design of the final design of this facility so that we can get a start on both understanding value engineering opportunities and other ways to ensure the project meets the schedule and budget that we've put together, as well as go out for early packages and get started on construction in 2025, 2026 timeframe. That'll put us at a completion by 2029. So that's what we have for tonight in terms of a presentation. I think we have a lot of opportunity for comment and discussion. I also forgot to mention that if you'd prefer to write your comment, we did have comment forms that were handed out at the welcome table, and you can drop those off at the end. So thank you. All right. Yeah. Do we have, is there one extra mic?
We have this.
Okay. I think what we'd love to do is.
I was just going to come up and offer to move the microphone around. When the time comes.
Gotcha. Yes.
Absolutely.
That's what,
Right.
What we'd love to do is have folks raise their hands. We also have an opportunity. There's a few elected officials in the room, though I think I've spoken to them, and they might reserve their comments for later. So what I'd love to do is, get started on a few comments. Sir. And we can bring a microphone to you.
Here, let me. All of those buildings have ground floor retail. Sorry.
That's a great question. I just want to make sure I heard the question correctly. Is that all the buildings associated with a community use land would have an opportunity for ground floor retail?
Right. I wasn't sure when you walked through it if you said that or if you mentioned a separate retail structure. So I wasn't sure.
Great question. Our intention and what we've presented to you today is that there is a feasibility to have ground floor retail across all of the buildings associated that are facing Washington Street. The retail component, the grocer component I mentioned in the presentation would be associated with Building A, which I can, let me go back to the slide here. It's where the number 4 is. So that site would be better sited for a larger sort of retail component. But the rest of the sites associated along Washington Street would have active edges on Washington Street with ground floor retail.
A question in the back?
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I have a few questions. As the city outlined the process, it seems that you get community output. There are 4 steps, correct? And you get community input. At the 3rd step, why? Things have changed. The whole plan just changed. Why are you not coming to the community and asking what we want done with that 8 acres before you get to step 3? That's number 1. okay? Because we have other asks and needs and wants. And also, first of all, I will always raise this because my skin crawls when you talk about using salt. You are a member of WU's cabinet. WU has run on the platform of being green. Why? We are not in climate change anymore. We are in climate crisis. Why are we still using salt? Why is it being stored near people's homes? And as for, I certainly believe in the recycling center, but that center was also supposed to be positioned near public transportation. If somebody is coming on a bus or a train to try and recycle something, that is a far walk from Forest Hills to that corner. Okay? That is not a good place to do that. I don't know why the MBTA has a lot of land around Forest Hills, why some of that isn't being used. If the city and the state can come together on that, if you want to have a char there. But that's not a good place, and also for driving, it's not because it's at the junction of two major streets, Forest Hill Streets and the Arborway. So it doesn't really make much sense in terms of traffic either. So I don't understand why we're using rock salt, period, why it has to be stored in JP. And we never know with climate crisis if we're going to have a severe winter or not. We don't know. And so I don't really understand why we're not using other alternatives to rock salt anyway, and why it has to be stored there, and why the char has to be there anyway, because it doesn't seem like a good place for it. Those are my comments. I guess that's not really a question, but if you want to address that.
I'll address your first question, and then I'll hand it over to Yasha. So for your first question, I think what we presented to you today was really just building off of JP Rocks. It is not intended to be the uses contemplated or as a given for those 8 acres. What I outlined here today is this is the process we will take to confirm those assumptions associated with the previous planning effort. So at each step of the way, there will be community process. So this is truly just the beginning. What we wanted to do today was to respond to the concerns before, that we could still accommodate some of the previous planning goals in the 8 acres as planned.
It's changed, but it's changed. I think you need to go back to the community before.
And we will. So this process right here is outlining what we will be doing as part of the disposition process. So it will be a blank slate in terms of how we evaluate what the opportunities will be, what the programmatic goals are, and that starts with the visioning and goal setting and continues through all of those phases.
Okay.
Hey, Diana,
Asha?
can you address what I said yesterday? Your restrictions about your side, you met your requirement, right? So what they put on the other part. We can't hear you. Okay, again, my point is, I'm Russell Holmes, I'm the state representative. So my point is what I was making to you yesterday. You met the requirement for your height. And so what's going to be decided by JP Rocks and all the other folks is still open. That's what the point is. But can you go back to your slide to make sure my concern is that height, go back, and that facility meets the specs that were asked for. Can you confirm that for me, please?
Yes, and thank you, Representative. So what you're seeing here depicted is an outcome of what had been associated with the program considerations as part of JP Rocks. As I mentioned earlier, and we started this slide, our intention is to reevaluate all of that, to have a conversation with the community about those uses, the program, the heights associated with it. But in what we are presenting to you today, it is in alignment with previous planning, and it does not deviate in terms of density or height. Sorry, Yasha needed an answer this time.
Yeah, so I'm happy to talk a little bit about salt and the charm. I will try not to stand up here and give a 20-minute thing about our winter operations and how we do salt, but fundamentally, salt is necessary for keeping roads safe during the winter. It is how we keep them clear for buses, for emergency vehicles, for people driving. There is no city in America that has found an alternative to eliminate the use of salt in the maintenance of their streets in serious winter weather. And contrary, salt does not cause climate change. Salt becomes actually, in some cases, more necessary because of the climate crisis. So this past winter, when we had about a foot of snow in total across the winter, we had more than 30 events where we had to put trucks on the street because we had precipitation with temperatures hovering right around the freezing mark, going up, going down, ice forms. Those are the scenarios in which we have to use salt more, not less. When we get a foot of snow, we can send plows out, and then we can follow it up with a layer of salt to clear things afterwards. When we don't have plowable snow, salt is the only tool that we have that can ensure that streets are clear and streets are safe. There's other things that we use. We have a brine tank. There's other solutions that are out there, but nothing on the market right now provides a sufficient alternative for providing the level of street safety that we need to provide, especially in our hilly areas. So there's more to say on that, and I'm happy to talk separately about some of the salt things, but it is necessary, and this location is critical. And if you look at a map of where our other salt facilities are located, there's basically nothing for about 4 miles to the south in 2 directions from here. And so this is a general area where we have to have some salt facilities. As for the charm location, I think this is still an ongoing conversation about exactly if we would do a charm at this location and what we would do, what kinds of services would be available there. Right now, if you have material in your house that you want to recycle that we don't pick up at the curb, your options are to drive to either southern West Roxbury or to Frontage Road a couple of weekends a year when we have drop-off events. That is what we provide today. And the consequence of that is that a tremendous amount of recyclable material ends up in the traditional waste stream where it should not be. So by creating facilities where people can do drop-off, we are trying to divert more of that. There will likely end up being many of them in Boston. New York is currently in the process of building, I think, 130 of these facilities across the various boroughs. We're looking at multiple locations, but this location, relative to most of the options we've seen, is quite transit accessible. It's not an immediate step off the train into the charm, but it is a relatively short walk. It's accessible by bike, and it's centrally located for people from many neighborhoods, which our current options are not. So it's one of the places we're exploring for this. I think there'll be further community conversations before we launch something permanent, but we have done one pop-up event there, and we will likely do more pop-up events in the ensuing years to help understand what's helpful for people and get feedback from the community about what works.
Can folks raise their hands who have questions? I know okay. So we have one in the front here. Okay.
Microphone's on the way.
Okay. And then we'll go to the one I saw right back there.
Actually, a statement on behalf of Transit Matters, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Sorry, just to say that again, my name is Eric Harrett. I'm here on behalf of Transit Matters. Some of these concerns have actually been addressed, so that's good, but I'm still going to read the whole thing. The Arborway Bus Maintenance Facility is critical to putting the city and the region on a path towards sustainability and equity. Transit Matters hasn't always seen eye to eye with the T's bus transformation team, but we have always shared the goal of getting electric buses on the street as soon as possible and of modernizing facilities to provide safer, cleaner, more inviting workspaces for bus operators and maintenance staff. The updated facility will allow the T to increase bus service on routes that currently run out of this facility, as well as bring in additional routes serving environmental justice communities like Roxbury, Mission Hill, and Mattapan. It will allow the T to make 40% of the buses in the city of Boston zero emissions with just one facility. We have bus facilities across the region that are in urgent need of replacement, and this upgrade will help the T improve bus service throughout the area. The upgraded facility gives the T the space that it needs to meet future demand. This is essential if we want the city and the state to be able to achieve their stated goal of shifting car trips to walking, biking, and public transit, which is the only way to reduce traffic while growing the region's economy. We reject the idea that additional buses are something that needs mitigation. The challenges before us today are entirely different than the ones we faced when the T originally signed the MOU with the city of Boston over 20 years ago. Back then, the city was struggling to find riders. Today, it struggles with capacity constraints to meet the needs of the riders it already has. Back then, vacant and derelict properties were the major housing concern. Today, we face an acute need for dense housing within walking distance of good transit, not the low-density vision articulated in the MOU, which does not mention housing at all. Ultimately, we feel strongly that asking T to downgrade the public facility that supports bus service disproportionately used by lower-income riders and riders of color is not appropriate when there is a 120 to 180-foot highway right-of-way bringing noise, congestion, and pollution into the neighborhood. Transit riders should not be the last ones prioritized. The advocacy of JPNDC, community members, and all the stakeholders has made this a better project. We're grateful for that, but better is not perfect, is the standard here. This is a modernization project and needs to support riders' needs now, but also prepare our system for bus network redesign. This has been a temporary facility for far too long. The forced purchase of additional CNG buses and the further delay of affordable housing projects will be too steep a price to pay. We support this facility and the benefits it will bring to both the local community and the city and the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. We got a couple comments right there. Yes, okay, go for it, Ashley, and then we'll come back to you. Sorry, but I need a new prescription.
Thank you, and thank you for this presentation, for being here. The second, the update is so dramatically different and so much more economic in terms of its size and use of space, and it allows the 8 acres. And I can't help but be curious why that wasn't the first design. And so it makes me wonder, is there a loss of functionality in the design that concerns you all? And if there's not, then how come that wasn't the first design?
No, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. I think when we began this program to modernize our bus maintenance facilities 5 years ago, though frankly it's been in discussion for much longer than that, given the state of our bus maintenance facilities, our original goal, as you've seen with the Quincy facility, was an all-indoor operation, which is in line with how a number of agencies in North America build bus maintenance facilities. But we do know that there are other models for how to build a bus maintenance facility. And so what we did when we were trying to make sure that we were listening to what we heard is we talked through with our staff what are the key priorities that we absolutely have to meet in order to meet their operational needs. And as you'll notice, the maintenance facility is largely the same. It's indoors and it keeps the same program, and that is really, really critical to having bus reliability. In terms of the storage being outdoor instead of indoor, what we have discussed and identified also through a literature review and review of some international as well as national examples is that it's most important to provide coverage over the buses, frankly, so that when it snows, we're not getting a plow out to try to, plow before our operators can go pick up their buses, and so that those overhead gantry systems for the charging are protected from the elements. But our understanding in working closely with our operational staff is that it is not absolutely a requirement that that specific function of storage be indoors. Of course, it's a preference. I think if folks have a car, you may not. You might prefer to keep it in a garage, but you also accept that sometimes it'll be in a carport and then sometimes it'll actually just be in street parking. Our operators pick up the buses, very early in the morning or midday or what have you, and this will still be under a lighted, facility that provides protection from the elements. And then 99% of their shift, they are out and about, and so that's not actually changing. And so, yes, we weren't here originally when we were going through the process to align with the original priorities that we had set out, and that was really, okay, let's build, absolutely the best that we can, because we recognized that we needed to make some tweaks where it wasn't going to be operationally painful, and we've identified that this is the best option, and it's really quite efficient. And if you look at the layout, and if you're familiar with our Quincy facility, it's actually quite efficient, quite similar in its circulation to how our Quincy facility is set up, which was just awarded for the construction contract today, so we're really excited about that as well. So I hope that answers your question. I see some head nods, so thank you. Bernie, I know you've been waiting.
On the left or on the right?
Right up here on the left, yeah.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Bernard Doherty. I'm here also representing the Askew Mountainwood South Street Neighborhood Association, by the State Lab, and I'm also a member of the Jamaica Plain Neighborhood Council, on which I serve as vice chair. I'd like to ask a question. Can you put up the front there where you have the units that you're thinking of putting on the 8 acres? Good, thank you. What is the height of that? What's that, number 4 there? What's the height of that? How many stories is that?
So that's based on the JP Rocks plan, and that is reaching a maximum height of 15 stories at its highest level, and that tiers down to about 7 stories.
Yeah, that's just what we want. 15 stories of housing with 951 units in it, where we pack people into it, which was done in the past, and those people have suffered for it. I don't want to see that. I want to see affordable housing. You ought to take a ride from Eggleston Square down Washington Street to Dudley Street, okay, Dudley Square, which used to be the old MBTA situation. And what you will see on each side of Washington Street, not where JP Rocks comes down with all this massive stuff they've got around here, but if you go down that roadway, you'll see nice housing built 3 to 4 stories high and set back. It's a community. And that's what we want this to represent here, a community. I don't want to see a wall which is put up to basically block the view of what you're building in back of it, okay? I want to see a garden of people that lives in a garden which they're surrounded by. I want to make that place something people are proud of, not a place where we're doing what happened at other construction sites we've had here over the decades. Not the way things should be moving. And should it be affordable? Yes, it should be affordable. But that has to be worked out. JP Rocks, I'm not interested in stakeholders who are trying to get their way here and build things. That's not what I want. What I want to see are the stakeholders that are sitting here and the stakeholders we'd like to come in here. The young man who stood up and says he believes that we just need to push more housing into transit-oriented housing. No, that's not the way to go. We want to make sure that people realize we're not talking about adults here. We're talking about children. We're talking about young people starting their lives off. We're trying to get people into the hope of living in a city, not in a concrete jungle. So that's what I want to make sure is number one when you consider putting up this housing you're talking about, and you contact the people, and I'd be happy to help you contact the people around that area, because in that area today, there is over 300 units, maybe close to 400 units on one side of Washington Street and now in the old Fitzgerald parking lot down there and other units that are around it. So there's a complete change of the amount of population and what's happening down there. And you need to take a look at that and don't be led astray by the JP Rocks. That's not what we wanted, never have wanted. Okay? Thank you. This gentleman wanted to speak to.
Hi, my name is Mark Ibunya. I'm a resident of JP for the last 8 years. I participated in Plan JP Rocks, and my comment is actually quite well-timed because my question was actually going to be for the BPDA representative. How do we accelerate this process? Because you've already gotten a lot of stakeholder input. For context, I've lived in my building at Jackson Square for about 7 years now, 8 years. My rent went up 17% according to, it is a nonprofit owned and managed building. So they're not in it for a profit. They were resetting my rent to the same rent that they are offering my unit to other people in my building. We need more housing. I'm from the concrete jungle of New York City. I was a child who grew up in an apartment, in dignified apartments. I assume that we're not building slums here. I would love to see 15 stories of housing because the housing crisis is very real for me. I am very grateful for the fact that I got a job that actually allowed my income to double, to actually be just above 100% area median income, and I was able to weather the 17% increase in my rent, but others cannot, and other people who are moving to this area cannot either, and nor can some of my neighbors who live on the other side of the station in the public housing. So if we can, so coming back to the question, is there any way that we can take advantage of all of the stakeholder input that you've already gotten, where we literally had a shouting match in this building upstairs 5 or 6 years ago for Plan JP Rocks? How do we not do that again?
Thank you for your comments. I think I just want to direct everybody back to the slide here, because I think what we are showing you today is certainly building upon those efforts, but this is going to go through its own community process as that land, those 8 acres, come up for disposition. I'm going to hand it over to Alexandria, who will talk through that process and when that timeline will occur.
Well, I'm not sure if I'll talk about the process for the 8 acres, but I did just want to encourage also comments on the bus facility portion. We know that we are critical to making sure that 8 acres can be opened up and all of that can be decided. So we wanna make sure that we've met folks' needs and we can keep rolling with this project. Gert.
Thank you very much. Over here next. Hi, my name is Gert Thorne. I'm a member of the JP Neighborhood Council and of the Arborway Subcommittee. I would like to applaud the gentleman from the back who asked, how come you didn't get to the scheme to begin with? I'm sorry that you have, in effect, wasted 1 year of probably 20 or 30 people's time focusing on the lousy design you came up originally based on whatever you all thought was appropriate, and now this is reasonable. It's just unacceptable that we get treated the way you are treating with us. I mean, you've kind of driven us around, showing us schemes, this is essential, absolutely, and now all of a sudden it's something else again. We can't trust you all, is what the problem is. And now I'll go further. The shell game, the 8 acres, I don't see 8 acres there. I see right now 8 acres subdivided into 3 parcels. Those 3 parcels happen to have entrances to the bus yard behind them. It's got a funny triangular piece. It's over part of the Stony Brook. Give us a legitimate 8 acres. Not acres subdivided by what you like. We'd like to see an accounting of it. I honestly don't believe we can trust you anymore. And I would go to BBDA also. Miss, I don't know how it works in Boston. I'm from New York City and from elsewhere overseas. But quite honestly, their planning agencies work for the communities. They don't work for the city per se in terms of moving ahead city agendas. We don't draw things before we talk to people. And that's inappropriate. I'm an architect. We don't do that. We have meetings first that you have. Don't show us diagrams that you think might be appropriate to impose on us. It's not the right way to do this thing. I would go one step further. So I think the 8 acres is a fake that you've given us at this point, and I would like to have an accounting for it, quite honestly. But the other thing I would say very simply, you're talking about assigning another design contract for this. It is probably the worst way of assigning design projects. You work from design from the beginning to the end so that there's continuity on the project. But I will offer you once again what we've offered you before. There are a series of architects in this room and as part of this group. We have offered to you our free pro bono design services. Why? Because we're going to lead your architects to reach an answer that is compatible with our needs in our community. That's of appropriate scale, appropriate design. Again, it's an issue of working together collaboratively, and I would like to just quote a section, and you all probably know that the MOUs, which may not be applicable in every single aspect, talk about the community involvement. And you all seem to be able to ignore that very simply. There are 3 entities to the MOUs, the MBTA, the city, and JP Neighborhood Council, which is the inheritor of the CPCA. You are not talking to us. The city is talking to the MBTA. And whatever you decide comes here. We need to be part of the process. We have architects who are knowledgeable in that. I am one. I've probably done more work than any architect I know of in the city of Boston, quite honestly, in terms of scale. Michael Epp, my colleague, we've done multimodal stations. He's done T stations in the city of Boston. We've done housing. We've done everything else. We need to work with you. And Alexander, last time I offered that, you said you don't have it in the budget. Shame on you. That's penny wise and pound foolish. We're offering free services. If you can't take advantage of it, then you don't know how to run a business, quite honestly. And you are, I believe, still, from last time I looked, you're a public entity, aren't you? You have a responsibility to the public.
Yep. Thank you, Gert, for your comments. So I'll try to address them quickly so that we can get to the other comments. So I understand that it's a surprise the extent to which we have adjusted this concept. I think we worked really hard in a number of meetings that we have attended with many of the folks in this room to listen and every time be responsive in the way that we could. Frankly, when we came out in June with what we felt like was a really optimized solution, we heard an overwhelming concern. So we knew we needed to take very, I won't say drastic because it's not a negative. We still are very proud of this concept, but a more aggressive look at what we can do differently to address all three of the major concerns that we heard in terms of scale, which we have changed dramatically, as well as making the site more efficient and making use of the 8 acres. And so that's what we've done, and we're really excited about opportunities like this where we get to hear that feedback and have that public participation and have a back and forth. And as we've done in the past, we will continue to offer that we're available to not only host these types of meetings at our milestones, and in fact, this one's actually kind of in between a milestone, but also come out when there's opportunities that folks would like us to be invited to and speak to the concept, how it's evolved, how we're being responsive, and hear feedback, at opportunities through JPNC, et cetera. So I do leave you with that. And I think there's a lot in your comment, but I do want to make sure that we get to all of the comments here tonight. I think this gentleman was next.
Excuse my voice. How you doing? Can you go back to the number 4, that picture?
Number 4?
Building 4.
Oh.
And you say that's 15 stories? Is that what you're saying?
Correct, at the highest level. So where the 4 is, it's a little bit lower,
For a
but it
supermarket,
rises.
right? A supermarket's 15 stories?
Sorry, the supermarket, it's at the ground floor level, and then there would be housing on top.
Housing on top of 4? And number 1 is housing also, correct? Picture number 1.
Correct. All of this is intended to have ground floor retail with housing above it.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm electrician, IBW, Local 103. And we do all sorts of buildings like this. We use Boston residents, women, minorities. So, and I'm a resident of this neighborhood. So, work-wise, I think we're the best trained to do it in all the building trades. But like I said, I am a neighbor, and I think that you need more, like a high school or some sort of daycare, because you have 900 units, low income. They do have kids. What are you going to do with all these kids that live in this facility?
No, and I think these are excellent questions, and I want to keep going back to this slide here because I do think that what we were showing you was a reflection of the previous planning effort and how that could be accommodated with the new site design. But this is really open to full community conversation about what are the goals and priorities, like daycare facilities, what are the things that are most important for how we leverage those 8 acres. I think our goal here was to achieve that 8-acre threshold, to meet the MBTA's needs, and to also hear a lot of the community feedback that we've heard.
We're not talking about the MBTA, man. We're talking about the community. I want to hear your response.
I think, these are all excellent ideas. I think we certainly want to take these into consideration. You have 8 acres, and you have to think of what are the trade-offs with each of the different programmatic needs. And I think this is right for a really robust community conversation around how we use those and how we leverage that land.
Okay.
Hello? Can I interrupt really quickly? Or did someone over there have the mic? Oh, go ahead. You go ahead. You had it. Go ahead.
My name is Michael Epp. I've been a resident of JP since 1980. I'm really glad to see that the MBTA and the city are talking, but as Gert said, you're missing a third component. In 1999, the city and the MBTA thought that the community was essential to this process, and they established an MOU that distinguished, what that process would be. There are people in this room that actually were on that committee starting back in 1999, very committed, some people living directly behind the proposed station. This is, JP is a community that's had some pretty good ideas. JP stopped a interstate highway from cutting Boston in half. It's now the Southwest Corridor, the Orange Line. I think on occasion, JP, folks might have an idea worth listening to. The MOU kind of describes how that process would work, and actually the final statement, final paragraph of the MOU says this is a legal and binding document. It's not something that can be ignored. The great thing about MOUs is a memo of understanding. Understandings change and they evolve. They're very flexible legal documents, and I think the advantage of having knowledgeable community members helping you make this a fabulous facility is great. The whole notion of having electric buses in Boston, this is something that should be celebrated. This should be a fabulous building. We can make it a fabulous building if we work together as a community. My background, I've been working on MBTA projects since 1989, including South Station Bus Terminal, Charles MGH Head House, and the concept drawings for the Green Line extension. I am dedicated to public transportation and a rigorous public process. I believe that democracy makes projects better. When I run a meeting, we usually start out without any design. We try to make our goals known to folks. And if they have questions, those questions are answered and recorded on an absolute basis. I give my home phone number to folks that want to call me in case they're too nervous to talk in public. In Somerville, I said to folks, if this was going through my neighborhood, I would want to be part of the process. You know more about your neighborhood than I do. I want to know what you know. Tell me, please. This should be your attitude about what could be a fabulous building here. JP has been behind building a bus facility here. It's not a NIMBY kind of issue at all. And the 8 acres is very important to be maintained because the city and the MBTA both said that this was to mitigate the impacts on the surrounding community. Mitigate the impacts. This is going to have, serious impacts. What you didn't describe is the front of your building. Actually, the bus circulation is right along the Arborway, the Emerald Necklace, a National Register historic monument. And you, in this current design, and I don't really want to get into a design critique at this point, you have buses in front of a historic structure landscape. I think you can do better than that. Thank you.
So thank you, Michael, for your comment. Just a quick note, you'll notice that this isn't designed yet. We have a long way to go through a final design process, and there'll be opportunities to understand how we can make sure it is beautiful, responsive, functional. In cases where it's appropriate, there might be fencing or greenery screening any elements. So there's a lot of opportunity there. There's a lot of questions, so I definitely want to make sure that we get to those. And I think that Representative Montano wanted to say something.
Right now, you're proposing an open-air concept. I know a little bit about buses, and actually, to have a unheated facility for electric buses will diminish the battery capacity by about 35%. You can shake your head, but that's a true statement. And to actually have something that doesn't require local recharging stations, which is another way to add to that charging capacity. A heated station is very, very important to reliability in a cold weather climate.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up. We do assume that there will be charging in every single bus parking space under that canopy. And from our, what we have worked with the manufacturer with the buses and also from talking to other agency, the concern may be if a bus is parked and uncharged and left with a dead battery for 3-4 days, something like that, that may start to affect battery life. But in this case, we're talking about buses that are getting charged every single night. Our specification for buses does account for preconditioning of the interior of that bus on the charger. And so we're really making sure that we're addressing some of those concerns, which actually are a little bit more relevant for diesel buses, which do have some challenges in super cold conditions. I know folks who operate other fleets that use diesel will have experience with this. So we are doing the research. We're looking into what is done nationally and internationally to make sure that this is going to work for those electric buses. Representative.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Montano. I'm the state representative for this district. Representative Holmes is here, and Senator Miranda's chief of staff is here as well. We've been working with the MBTA in the city of Boston on this project in order to be able to get it to the point where I think we wanted it to be. This is a win. This conversation, the 8 acres, getting the housing in one area, concentrated, lowering the height, these are all things that people have asked for and that have been delivered. This is still a conversation that's in process. And so the housing, the future 8 acres usage, that's gonna come at a different time with planning from the Article 80 process. So I think we should hold off on addressing that because that's not what this meeting is about. This meeting is about the MBTA bus yard and how they'd like to proceed and move past their 15% threshold into the next portion of that. And so if we could hold off on commenting on what will be an Article 80 process in the future, which is the BPDA's 8 acres, and comment on the MBTA's parcel, I think that would be most helpful for this project moving forward and for the goals that we're hoping to meet here. I know that, JP Rocks was 5-6 years ago. Maybe you didn't participate in it. Maybe you don't remember what happened. Maybe, there was a lot of meetings up there. There's some backdoor deals that happened. It's a crazy, crazy thing. But that's something else, and that'll be addressed in the future. Right now, we're talking about the bus yard, the changes to the Emerald Necklace access points, the way that they've gotten rid of the driveways and the exits for the buses. If we could focus on that, that would be best. And know that we are hearing you. I've met with them multiple times. Rep. Holmes has met with them multiple times. We've had these conversations. We are listening. I don't want people to feel like they're left out of the loop. I think there have been changes that we've been looking to see, and they're here and they're addressed. And so I think we should also take this as, the gentle win that it is and keep going and know that it's not all, we don't have to keep going in a negative direction, I think. But thanks.
Hi, my name is Gabriel, and I've lived in JP for 35 years. And I know that a lot of people have been working on this for like 20 years and put a huge amount of time into this, and I really appreciate that. But I think that this proposal is so much better than what I saw last summer. I mean, I think we have to acknowledge this is good. We've got more greenery along the Emerald Necklace. The depot isn't as high. The entryways are on Washington Street. So I think we should look at this as something positive. It's not perfect yet. I'm a little concerned about entryways on Forest Hill Street and Brookley Road. But this is so much better than what was presented last summer. And the 8 acres are still up for debate. We can keep working on that and decide what we want and how we want it. So I think this is a win as far as I can see. I feel like we were listened to from last summer.
Thank you. This gentleman over here has been waiting, I know.
How we doing? I'm Joseph Pierre. I'm with IBEW Local 103. We train the most electricians in the state. Our incoming classes for the last 3 years has been 32% minority and women, 52% minority and women, and 53% minority and women. And the communities this project is going to serve are mostly minorities, right? How do we make sure that the local workforce is included in this project? Because if this project goes out to bid, right, without a PLA, there's a very high chance that a contractor from New Hampshire, right, could come here and do this project with no minorities on their team, no women on their team. The only way to make sure that this project, right, has the people that's working on this project looks like the community that it's working in is to make sure that you talk to the unions. Has there been talks amongst yourselves about coming to the union and having this conversation?
So thank you so much for that question and that comment. I know it's a priority for not only the MBTA and in the city and in this state, and frankly also with this federal government, that we ensure that our public investments are supported through diverse labor and through unionized labor. And so we are not quite there yet. We're at boxes on the page. We want to get this project rolling so that we can get closer to talking about the contracting mechanisms for delivery and understanding what we can do to be supportive of the concerns that you raised and that we've also heard at the board meeting earlier today. So my group will actually not be delivering this project. We're doing this early phase. We're making sure that it meets the operational needs programmatically. We will be handing it to a different department in the MBTA who will be working through design, construction, and all of the contracting aspects. And I know that they're aware of this concern, and they'll make sure to continue working to make sure it's addressed.
Here, let me give you the mic back.
There you go. Sorry, no problem. Thanks. I think you said that in the next phase you'll be bringing in a construction manager for this project. Will you be engaging with the unions before this is done? Because I know once the construction manager comes in, it's probably a done deal.
Well, from my understanding, when we bring on the construction manager, and I'd love to take back this comment and make sure that we can be responsive to it if I don't cover everything. But when we bring on a construction manager in design, we're really just bringing them on for a set of pre-construction services that will help ensure the design meets all of our targets, and in particular, our schedule target, working with them because they will be much more aware of what's going on in the marketplace in terms of schedule drivers, like what we've seen with other projects with supply chain delays, et cetera, and be positioned to put out early packages even before we finished all of the design for appropriate pieces of work. But we will not be immediately negotiating the guaranteed maximum and setting out all of those subcontracts quite yet. That will come later in the process. And so I'd love to take back the part that you asked about kind of when exactly we will be engaging with the unions. I don't have a specific response to that, but I know that just because we'll be bringing on the construction manager does not mean, we will be close to that guaranteed maximum and deciding all of the subcontracts. That will be a ways off as we're closer to final design, which will be a 2-year process. I hope that answers your question. So somewhere in the next 2 years, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot to design. As you guys are, I mean, as you're aware, there's a lot of electrical infrastructure with this project. We're talking about, 200 electric buses. We have a lot of design development to go through. So we need to make sure that we have locked in this initial concept so that we can get moving on that. Yep.
You're good. Okay.
No phase where.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Hello, my name is June. I'm from the Emerald Necklace Conservancy. Thank you so much for this opportunity to comment. Just have one question about the shared gate with the Public Works Department. I don't know if that's still like a secondary employee access and entry, or if buses are going to be using it. And then I'm wondering how that linkage will kind of improve just the experience into Franklin Park, because I know that specific area is very neglected. I'm wondering if there's going to be any, because I know in one of the presentations it's, it says expanded area of landscape create linkage to Franklin Park. I'm wondering if there's any discussion of improving that linkage, and if there's going to be, what's the plan with like the contaminated soil on that plot? Because I know that's something that was discussed in the MEPA report, and so I'm just wondering if there's going to be some kind of protocol with that as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your questions. So just to take them one at a time, oops, sorry about that. In terms of the shared access point, as was true of the previous concept, this would be an exit for primarily delivery vehicles that serve the maintenance facility. Those are not a high volume by any means, mostly during the day, during the week. That would be shared with the Public Works exit. And from our understanding, that's sort of a complementary time that we're talking about, needing to make use of that exit. And in neither case are we talking about a huge volume of vehicles, over the course of an hour or a day. So I don't think that we anticipate any conflicts. Well, we're not going to be getting deliveries in the middle of a winter storm. Right. So, and then in terms of this area where there's this 48-foot setback to our building, we, have identified that that's an opportunity for some greenery, whether there's any other component. I think that's something that can be part of schematic design and design development. We look forward to hearing additional ideas for, how that connection to Franklin Park could be enhanced.
My colleagues from the Parks Department are not here, but there is a Franklin Park action plan that's been developed and is really looking at all sections of the park, including this very underutilized stretch right here. So I think with a design like this, there's a lot of potential to make some intentional linkages. I think, this is a new design. It wasn't present when the Franklin Park plan was being put together. So there's conversations still to be had with the Parks Department about this interface and how to make that, much better than it is today. So.
Okay. We've got one down here. Let's go 1, 2, 3 across if we can, and come over to you. Or sorry, had you picked someone?
One in the back has been, and then we'll come down.
Okay. We'll do a loop here.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
I think this gentleman right
here. My question is that I really trying to find out, are you absolutely certain that you can find, go back to that picture, please.
Which
to
one?
the PW, the salt, yes. So I'm hearing you that you couldn't find any other site in the city of Boston to deposit your salts and what have you. This is a prime real estate area that can be used for something else. So I just wanted to make sure that you were telling us that you've looked all around Boston, you couldn't find at all where you can deposit these salts?
So the need is not anywhere in Boston. The need is within probably about a half-mile radius of this area as we look at our operational model and where we have existing facilities and where we have gaps between those facilities. Another element of the need is about road access, because this is a facility that serves communities mostly nearby and to the south, both going into Mattapan, JP, Roslindale. And so there's a sort of limited geography of interest for us that would work from an operational perspective to allow us to do what we need to do from a winter operations perspective. We have looked at other potential sites. The city does not own any other suitable sites. We have looked within the MBTA portfolio. We have not found other suitable sites in this vicinity. If I could wave a wand and just take some private land and turn it into a salt facility, there are probably other locations that could conceivably serve this, but we do not have available to us as the city or through the MBTA an alternative right now.
All right, so we'll take a couple right here.
Great, thank you. It's really a shock to see this. You've knocked the facility in half. So I think, it's simpler, which is nice, and it really makes it look like it can get built in a more direct fashion. I think it's also a shock to a lot of people because we came in, I know we have some architects in JP, and we came in expecting to fight like, it's just like fight like dogs to get a good result. But right now, there are a lot of questions. I mean, this thing is so totally different from what was presented before. So one question is, you talked about the employee parking being moved to one building, and I don't see where you explained which building it is, or is it off-site, or what? Then another question is, could you go back to the salt yard drawing, the Public Works Department drawing, that one. And then you see the landscape buffer, so where it says, I think 40 feet or 48, it's hard to tell, there's a tree in the middle, but 40 feet?
48.
Oh, 48, okay, so if you scale that across to the other corner of the building on the left side, right there, that's gotta be less than 20 feet. And it looks like it's only 20 feet from the sidewalk. And the state regulations call for at least 25 and the old MOU from 2003 was 50 feet. But another thing is if you go to the blue sketch of schematic of all the buildings, the large, that one, it has kind of an I don't know if that's an overhang, so it says plus 30 feet. Does that mean it's a few feet more than 30 feet along that edge, or what does that mean? Along the edge where?
30 feet, like 30 feet from the ground.
30 feet from the ground, okay. So that's the height of a three-family building. So it's really an improvement, again, that you've pushed everything back away from the Arborway, but it also looks like there's an overhang. There's a black line there. Does the building overhang there, or?
I think that's a potential articulation of the facade, but
It's not the facade?
That's not a basic requirement. No, there is no programmed overhang for the
Okay,
mezzanine.
so that wall where it's only maybe 20 feet from the sidewalk, which is really close, that needs a green wall or something. It needs to be designed in a way because the MOU from 2003 calls for 50 feet and a minimum of 25. You didn't answer the question about the employee parking. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I got all your comments.
Well, I think it's pretty important because I think a lot of people that really care about design are in shock. We don't quite, it's so schematic. You look at this blue thing and you can't picture what can be done with it. And it's all these hard edges, and this is the emerald necklace, which is all curves. And so it really doesn't look like it fits in right now. But if you could fill in more of those details, that would be great.
Yeah, and I think we've heard also that we don't want to jump into design too quickly, that we want to have more of a blank slate is something that we, I think, heard a couple comments ago. So with this schematic, we're really trying to strike that balance, general massing, but it still is yet to be designed, and we're taking note of the types of comments that you're making about, you know, the responsiveness to the edge, incorporating curves, et cetera, to see, you know, that will be a back and forth through schematic, through the next phase, frankly. To respond about the employee parking, so this will, you know, we have identified that this would need to be accommodated in one or maybe two structures that are approximate to where the inspectors would sit for operators when they're checking in before they go get their buses. But we understand that we needed to come out and really present this concept, and exactly how that's going to work is going to be in part dependent on the rest of the planning for the 8 acres, and some decisions will need to be made about that earlier, you know, than others, but that will be, you know, part of that process. And so I think, you know, Diana can probably speak a little more to that. Just quickly on the point about the proximity to the emerald necklace before I hand it over to Diana. Yes, there is a pinch point with this design that, you know, we've sought to maximize the setback from the Arborway to them as much as possible while still meeting our operational needs. But we still need to accommodate 200 buses for all of the reasons that we discussed at the beginning of this presentation and all of the benefits that that will bring. And at the end of the day, that has meant that in order to prioritize identifying 8 acres, identifying what our minimum requirements are operationally to support 200 buses, that we have found that there would be, you know, a layout that might have this small portion that has a pinch point, but we can continue to work to see how we can be responsive and sensitive given that. For example, having that lower height, et cetera. So, you know, I recognize that there is that proximity there, but I think this was still done thoughtfully and in response to maintaining our priority with the 200 buses and the equity benefits that that brings, as well as being responsive to the comments we heard.
I think it's an excellent question. I think that's something that as we go through the disposition process and the visioning for the 8 acres, there are a myriad of ways in which you can accommodate that. Correct. So as part of the ULI TAP, I think one of the recommendations that came from that was to consider the consolidation of the community use parking with the MBTA parking to sort of find a shared facility between the two uses. So there are a myriad of ways to achieve that, whether that be underground, whether that be podium or structured, and that's something that we would want to sort of take up as part of the visioning for those 8 acres.
What we've identified is around 150. And I know that's a lot, but we're also talking about a site that will have a lot of uses associated with it. And so I think there will be, you know, if there's a grocery store, some people will walk there, some people will bike there, some people will take transit, but some people will drive their cars there, load up their groceries on a Saturday. And so it's not, you know, as if there wasn't going to be parking anyway. And I think that's what the ULI group really identified as an opportunity and a way to much more efficiently accommodate all of these needs. Sarah?
Thank you. Oops. Let's see if I can stand up. Hi, everyone. Sarah Freeman. Sorry to have my back to some of you. Like others have said, I'm glad to see that you're listening and to our elected officials who have pushed as well. Thank you for that. It does feel like progress. I have a couple comments and a question. I'm surprised that, I think it was Diana said, the commercial use seemed new because the MOU 20 plus years ago, the 8 acres was going to be housing. Also, surprise Transit Matters. Yes, it was in the process. I don't know, Eric, if you were here 20 years ago, but I think people can verify housing was a huge priority, as well as commercial use, green space, and even recreational use were mentioned in all those meetings back in the day. Let's see. I'm also surprised to hear the number 980. I don't know where that came from, but the number in my head, and I'm getting old, was in the 740s. And yes, we need housing, and if it can be done, great, and that'll be the Article 80 process. So won't go into huge detail other than to say my sense of urban design is you try to be compatible with what's across the street, like 6 stories, maybe more uniformly. I don't know about the stuff, but food for thought. My question is, the notice of project change and the MIPA review was put on hold. So what's your expectation for how that'll proceed?
Thank you, Sarah. So we'd expect, given that we've changed this concept, as many of you noted, in somewhat of a shocking and we really hope positive way, to meet the need, to meet the concerns that we heard, we would refile that notice of project change reflecting the updated concept. And so that's something that we'll be looking to do as we move this project forward. There's someone who's over here who's been waiting for quite a bit, so I do want to get to him, and then we'll come back.
Thank you very much. Glenn Berkowitz with an organization called A Better City. We're a nonprofit in downtown Boston. Back in 2019, we published one of the first reports in the United States encouraging the MBTA to do several things. One, your bus fleet is one of the most important aspects of the T. You maintain all your buses from like 9 bus garages whose average age is 50 years old, some of which are 90 years old, that used to, literally they were built to house horses that pulled carts that pulled people. We encourage the T to seriously think about building bus maintenance facilities to house all battery electric buses. We encourage the T to think about public-private development opportunities, both to maximize benefits for the abutters, as well as importantly, to find the money from the private sector working with the public sector to help pay for some of this stuff, since we all know the T budget is longstanding an issue. So just sort of in general, as a total compliment to Alexandra, Diana, and Yasha for your presentation, from what I've seen from the last meetings, this is, 1,000% showing that you've sincerely listened to many of the comments, and I just want to be maybe the 3rd or 4th person to at least compliment you for your hard work, and I'm sure everybody in the room appreciates everything that you're doing, even if there's still a whole bunch of questions. I just wanted to start with that. I do have just 2 quick questions, the second of which is a kind of expressing a concern. The first question is on the issue of 150 parking spaces for MBTA employees that would be, as I heard it, incorporated into the private development that would occur on the 8 acres. Is the T committing to help pay for those spaces, since we've all learned that building parking spaces is one of the most expensive thing about new development, right? And the city's changed. I don't need to say this to some of the esteemed city employees up in the front, some of the city's changes parking requirements to reduce them in order to get developers to spend less money on building buildings so that they would be more affordable. Here, we're now going to require a developer to put 150 parking spaces in. So my first question is, has that piece of the anything you could share with us tonight on that? And then I have a second question, but if you want to answer that one first, Alexandra.
Sure thing. And I wanted to make sure that our chief of real estate was here, as answering that question is kind of part of a larger question about the disposition of this property and how that will work.
Hi, everyone. Richard Henderson, Chief of Real Estate, MBTA, and a JP resident. Glenn, great question. It is something we've discussed with the city. Per the MOU, actually, the property is to be transferred for consideration to the city. And it is, as we work that out, the cost of the parking is going to be considered when we determine what that consideration is going to be. So it's kind of built in, not that we would be paying cash, but we would be considering that cost, which in the future we'll figure out what that cost is someday. It's going to be more expensive than today, et cetera, but it's going to be worked into that arrangement.
Roger that. And then just the second question. And so totally supportive, of course, of switching the T's fleet from diesel buses to battery electric buses, of course. And you referred to the contract that the T, I believe, executed. It was either 4 months ago or
July. Yeah.
With a very reputable manufacturer to build up to, I think, 400 or 500 battery electric buses under that contract. Now, my organization, A Better City, was one of the only organizations back in May of 2022 that commented on the bid specs for those new battery electric buses. And we were very concerned, I'll say this very quickly, and again, it's meant in a very supportive way of the effort, is the bid spec actually requires the bus manufacturer of an all-battery electric bus to install a diesel fuel tank on the battery electric bus and have a diesel fuel heater to bring the bus up to heat and keep it at heat. It absolutely requires, and you could disagree as
No,
great.
no, I'm happy to discuss.
And so we were very concerned about that at A Better City. We tried to encourage the T to delete that requirement. We were told and we understood that the technology of battery electrical buses, they really felt the need to do that. Why I'm bringing this up now is for the last 4 years, all we've been told, everyone, is we're going to house our battery electric buses in enclosed space that's heated, just like a couple of people have said before. So just bear with me, there's a little bit of a shock, and not in a bad way, that here's the first time, other than the 30 buses up in North Cambridge, which have already been stored outdoors, those are going to be the first battery electric buses. But using North Quincy as an example, it's totally enclosed. All the battery buses are going to be inside. And so I'm sitting here wondering, am I supposed to walk away thinking that this new change of having outdoor space may mean that 200 battery electric buses, but actually ones that are completely heated and cold and brought from being cold soaked, frozen in the morning, up to heated speed before they to heated conditions before they even leave the site, that there's going to be diesel fumes coming out. And the last piece about my diesel thing is that under federal regulations, when you have a diesel bus, the emissions coming out of the smokestack are regulated by the EPA, but they're not regulated by the EPA when it's just an onboard supplemental diesel heater. So you could actually get more particulates and pollutants out of that. So thank you for bearing with me. My question is, have you thought about what I'm raising under this change of storing them outside, and are you ready to commit that these buses will not have supplemental diesel heaters that will be used to heat them before they leave the site in the morning?
So our plan is to heat up the buses while they're on the charger. So there's no diesel being used to bring them up to the cabin temperature that we'll need for service. That is what's also going to be, that has also been part of the specification, that preconditioning capacity is included, and that is what we'll do in North Cambridge, and that is what we would assume for Arborway. We also, frankly, will have a lot more practice with these battery electric buses before Arborway opens with Quincy and with North Cambridge. And the intention of having a supplemental heater is really to make sure that we can meet our service requirements, but to minimize its use as much as possible. So it's not only a supplemental heater. There is a normal electric heater, like we actually have on buses today, that can operate when it's in more temperate temperatures, 40s, maybe even 30s. We can identify what is that appropriate changeover as we roll out the initial fleets from Quincy and North Cambridge. And in addition, we can also do other things in our network as we get rolling with this program, as we move forward, to eliminate the need for relying on those heaters at all, even on the coldest days, like having en route charging opportunities at different stations where there's a lot of buses that come together. And that's something that we've taken an initial look at, identified 5 priority locations, and something that we definitely want to see if we actually were awarded a grant from the FTA to take a closer look at that at Ashmont, which could be something that could work with the Quincy facility. And so I definitely want to head off any concerns that we're going to be having this diesel fumes in the early, in the winter mornings, because that is not going to be the case. That's why we're ensuring the buses can precondition on those cold mornings on the charger. And most of them will frankly have been on the charger, all night anyway. And so it's not as if it's a real true like cold soak in that sense. And also think, this will be the 3rd major deployment in our journey towards battery electric bus. There's going to be a lot that we're going to learn and a lot that we can then establish as norms for how we operate those, how we're cutting our different blocks and our service criteria for making use of those, maximizing all of the benefits and minimizing the use of diesel heaters. And who knows, maybe the batteries will have gotten better by 2029 when we're filling up this facility. So I did want to remind us that we do have a while in the world of bus technology to go before this facility is open. We know from the get-go, minimizing the use, not having it being used to preheat the buses. But in addition, there's these other measures for how we can minimize the use in routine service as well. Thank you for your question and your comments, Glenn. Sir, so we have 2 right here, 1, and Alan, I know.
Thank you. Hi, Carolyn Royce. I'm also a member of the Arborway Yard Subcommittee. I'm of course super happy that the facility is on a timeline to get built. That was the #1 goal, is to have a new facility built. I wonder if you could talk a little more about the access from Washington Street. That's a very big change too. I know the plan's gone back and forth a couple of different ways, but it's very big to have it come off Arborway. And that also probably was very contingent on the city's planning for the community land too. So can we take a look at how you envision that's going to work for buses and cars going in and out? Thank you.
Thank you for your comment and your question, Carolyn. So it will work very similar to how it works today. And the key thing to note is, we have a 118 bus facility that operates along Washington, in and outs along Washington today. And so there will be a few added trips, but what we've done with an initial look at the numbers is it's truly an insignificant number. I think we're talking about 3 or 4 during like a peak hour for the roadways, because as we've talked about in previous meetings, the peaks for our buses are not at the same time as the peaks for roadways. They're mostly going in and out at an earlier time period. But you're right that setting up this access does have implications for the roadways that frankly would have been designed anyway to really help break up those 8 acres so that they can also serve our site. We're assuming at this point in time that the entrances would largely come in here. So coming up, a lot of the vast majority of the buses are coming up from Forest Hills and turn in a right turn here, and then go in through our gates located at the edge of this property here. And then they'd come in and park in the westwardly direction. And then when they come out, they would come out at this point, which is probably pretty close to where they come out today, and make a left turn here for going down to Forest Hills, or in some cases, maybe some make a right turn to go up Washington Street. So that's generally the approach that we're assuming for the circulation. It's possible that these roadways could, move a little bit here, up or down, here or there. We know this street is not exactly like a high traffic street, and so it's not something that the initial look at the traffic engineering was kind of concerned about having that proximity there. But that's something that we can continue to study and evaluate as we progress the design, exactly where those 2 locations fall. Does that answer your question, Carolyn? Yes, and I think, some of that will be managed and studied through the Article 80 process of exactly how the traffic will work with the community uses. But we know that in general, the volumes that we're talking about for buses are very, very low when you're looking at the volumes of the roadway network in general. So there are not concern. It's an existing condition for the vast majority of the buses, and then for some of the additional buses, it's not anything significant in terms of adding to the network, in particular because so many of those buses are leaving at non-rush hour times.
The one thing I just want to add is that this whole sort of view envisions a significantly reconfigured Washington Street, and the planning for that would likely happen contemporaneous to the planning for how the 8 acres of community use land would be used, and starting to look at the potential vehicle volumes, the massing, the number of units of housing, the number of square feet of retail, all of the drivers of trips that would put traffic onto Washington Street and in those shared use access roads that are shown on the plan. So I think we have an unusual opportunity, which is to plan the roadway that would serve these bus movements at the same time that we're planning for this facility, and make sure that we're building something that it can accommodate them, whether that's the open question about whether one or both of those entry points need to be signalized, and what other kinds of signal treatment or road space allocation we might have to make sure that buses can effectively make the movements they need to move. All of that is something that we can plan for in the course of planning out the future of Washington Street.
So I know we're close to 8 o'clock. How many comments do we have left? If we want to get these 3, Alan, do you want to start, and then we come here, and then we have one more in the back.
Hello, my name's Alan Iyer. I've been working on this since the outset, and I just want to say we're all here because we're all here. It's because people have turned out for meetings when we really needed you, and our electeds have supported us and been there with us through the whole thing. So, it's really important that we're all here. And I just want to say this is, I heard something about buses don't have impacts. Well, we live here. We have Forest Hill Station, which has 22 routes going in and out of it. And we have the bus yard that takes care of those 22 routes. And, some of us spend a lot of time watching how they behave on the roads, and there's a lot of impacts to those. And we're looking at adding more buses to this fleet. And then we have, cars are a problem. what a big problem is, we don't have any effective and probably never will east or north-south, or excuse me, east-west kind of transit. So people need to use their cars to get from Mattapan and Dorchester up to jobs and up in on the other side of town. And so they come through my neighborhood, and that's just the way it is when we we welcome them. It adds a lot of life to the streets. And then in the evening, they have to get home. So they come back through our neighborhood in the evening. And so there are impacts. And, you know, these buses on the streets, we already see the impact. So we're looking at more buses on the streets. And we're not complaining about that, but you have to figure out how to make it work. And that's about impact mitigation. And I'm very, Carolyn Royce had brought it up, that we're going from what it looked like was 2 entrances and exits, one on the what's now a busy Arborway and one on a very busy Washington Street. And those are both critical thoroughfares for folks. And now we're looking at basically dumping all the bus traffic onto Washington Street. And so and I see how it works currently. I can look at your traffic models, but I've never seen a traffic model that showed that there was a problem, or that there was a big enough of a problem in the traffic model that you'd take action. But when you're on the streets and you see how the buses matriculate around the facility, or excuse me, around Forest Hills to get to the facility, and now we're going to focus permanently all those buses onto Washington Street through, I think, I've felt that for flexibility and resilience on the facility, it really could use an entrance exit on Washington Street and then a second one on the Arborway. And that, we could go through how the buses get around Forest Hills and how they get to the facility, but, that would address that. And I know I've played with your plans. I got it last night, and I know they're big. There's to squeeze those 200 buses on the site. If you went to 169, you got rid of some unassigned buses. You could do it. I know it's super hard to make that work, but I'd love for you to consider how to, that because you already have the intersection there. The buses are they're going to be using that to do the U-turn. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just standing here.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. So let's see. So that's, I think, and it's impacts. It's how do we make this work? We're looking at a lot more density coming onto the street, and how do you make it work? So the parking, it seems like you're kind of dumping the parking into the community, and I kind of support that, because before you had it in extremely expensive square footage in the bus facility, so it'll make it, we're trying to make this facility affordable and work, and I think, and so, I don't know, we're going to have to work, hopefully very closely on making that function. Affordable housing, it was brought up that housing wasn't a part of this, and in the MOU, well, everybody got or a lot of folks got a bit of the MOU, and it says priority uses, affordable housing. And so we're looking at more than 50% affordable housing, and that's largely because Kathy Brown forced me to put it on the table to get put into this MOU at a really intense meeting, and it's been there ever since like 1999. We're trying to make it happen. We're doing things down here, and I think people just think maybe we're kind of being prima donnas because we're fussing about this setback, or the fact that, with this facility, you will no longer be able to look down Stoneley Road over to Forest Hills Station and see the hills and the Arboretum. You'll be looking at a bus facility. Well, that's an impact that has an effect on people's lives. And so the ramps, it looks as though it's pretty much all at grade, or the entries, pretty much all at grade. So, and then the facility itself is, this is a question, the facility itself is what, how much higher than, say, the adjacent community land?
It varies, but in certain portions, it would be as small as, or I think as large as 4 feet in a difference between Washington Street and our parcel. Another thing that we're able to do with that surface parking is actually have a very slight grade across the, ooh. Time's up, I guess. We're able to have a slight grade, which actually does change. It does have a big impact when we're talking about as wide of a parcel as we're talking about. Alan, I do know that we're at 8:05. There is a few other people that did have their hands up. And so I do want to make sure those 3 other people are able to speak, because some of them have been waiting quite a long time.
Yep. But, you know, and this, I'll just get to the 8 acres. You know, there's 8 acres functionally, or not necessarily functionally, but, you know, by numbers, a lot of that's not very good 8 acres. So, we're pushing, but we want it to be what happens there, high quality, that we can do what we need to do on the community land. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just be very brief. You know, what we've put together and shown tonight has been fully in response to the priorities that we heard, and that there are a lot of priorities for those 8 acres. Clearly, affordable housing, but also other types of uses, and we wanted to make sure that we have a contiguous parcel that's addressing that. And I'm happy to go into greater detail on the traffic piece, though we are extremely confident that the impacts will not be negative. And frankly, the more capacity we have for transit, the less traffic there is. And I think we all can get behind that. We know that the more people that are in buses, the less people are in cars. So I do want to make that point. We're building this facility for 75 years to have an opportunity to increase service over that period is really, really important, because we see what happens when we build too small and then we get stuck and then we can't provide more peak service when we need it. So I did want to just make those 2 points. I know you had a lot in there, and to get to these last 3 comments.
Here you go, try that.
After all this time? Okay, there we go. It's not just the volume, I understand what you're saying, but even now, the intersection of Arborway and Washington Street doesn't work. I mean, it is very often gridlocked. And it's gridlocked because it's a large intersection going across Washington Street from one to the other. And cars don't want to, are afraid of having to wait for the light. So if you get a large articulated bus, that's going to add to it. In addition, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe some of those 60-foot buses are going to turn, west onto Arborway, to go to parts.
Depending on it.
Depending.
They might actually go right up to Newbie.
My bottom line is that I think now I would urge the appropriate group or city agency to look at the traffic patterns from a very wide perspective, improving what we have now as to why there's gridlock, the timing of the lights, where things need to be controlled. But while you have the time before this site goes live, this would be a wonderful opportunity to do that, and I think it needs to be done.
No, thanks for the comment, and we'll certainly take that into consideration as we work through the design and with the city.
I'm writing. No, there's a significant opportunity to make improvements at the various intersections along the Arborway, and in particular with Washington Street. There's a lot of, frankly, safety concerns there in addition to the congestion concerns. So I think it's a great suggestion that we use this as an opportunity.
Just a really quick comment. Thank you for this revised design. You made a lot of changes and addressed many of the community concerns, and I think overall it's very positive. So thanks for all the work, and I look forward to continuing to work with you on the finer points.
Thank
That's
you.
It. Thanks.
Thanks for your comment. We had maybe one more. Are we good? There's one over here, but okay. I think the last comment for this gentleman over here. Ashley, and then I think we're good.
Hi, my name's Tim Long from Local 103. I just wanted to touch on a few of the previous speakers. My good friend Josh Pierre mentioned about going to the table, and you said it was a different department. I would just implore you to reach out to that department now.
Yep.
To get the talk started on doing a PLA, or again, the residents of this community have suffered the effects of all the diesel buses and all the CNG buses and all the traffic. They're the ones that deserve some opportunity at working in their backyard and working close to home. And so I would like to push that you reach out to these departments and ask them to reach out to the unions and start those discussions sooner than later, because as Rep. Holmes had said, we need to get going on this. And I understand the timelines. I'm a 20-year employee at the MBTA. I commute all the time. I see it. I know what you folks are dealing with, but you have to understand what the rest of these people are dealing with. And it's the uncertainty. It's the watching these different people of the different license plates, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, or worse. I know in some of the red line work, there was New Jersey, Pennsylvania, people coming in and working on these projects. And the people that live 2 blocks away going, how come I can't get over there?
No,
So,
that's a great, sorry to cut you off.
No worries. I just, again, I think a big proponent of the PLA would help with the
preferred
budget
labor.
also, which is, you know, in Massachusetts, budgets have been an issue in the past. So I think a PLA would be the way to go, and I think it could get done very well.
Thank you so much for your
Thank you for the
comment. We are certainly in coordination with the Capital Delivery Department who will deliver this. The preferred labor agreement came up today as well at the board meeting when they were given the presentation, and so we'll continue that discussion. There's a lot of work to be done on the MBTA, both in construction, but frankly also in making sure we can operate and maintain these buses. So I definitely do want to also maybe end with a positive note, which is that we're really excited to embrace this new technology and for all of the work that means both on the construction side, but then also in operations and maintenance, and see what opportunities that has to support all of the communities that we serve as well. So yeah, next steps are, I think, where we have heard comments, we're gonna take this back, we're gonna meet with leadership and see that we can award the contract for final design and keep this process moving forward with the next designer where we can really get into the details on some of the finer points as was discussed. And really work with the city to identify all of the requirements that'll be needed to be in place and consolidated in order to have everything documented in terms of our site and the assumptions and implications for the 8 acres and the public works site. So we're excited to get to work on that.
So I'm going to be brief and just simply say 30 seconds. Several of you have asked the same question I asked them. Like, why did this get so much better? I heard you guys say that, and it nails down to they came from a Quincy idea with having things that were sheltered, and now you guys have pushed them, we have, as a community, have pushed them to do something much better. And so just like with the Casey Overpass meeting, as I've heard from other folks, we sat through many meetings and you guys made things better. You made this better too. This is a much better idea because you guys pushed us. And so continue to do that. I know it's some painful days that I have to sit through here and listen to some of these comments, but it is better, and it is because you have made it better. And that's the real reason why it's better. So I'm asking them now, as I heard the young lady say, how much longer do we have to wait for this? Do we have to wait another year? To their point, I think this thing needs to get really started in earnest come January, and I'm sure we'll start this again in January, and I'll take that same seat. But I just want to say again to you guys, thank you. And also, meetings can also be held on the other side of this community. I've said that before. It doesn't have to just be here in JP. I want to have the next meetings, some of those over at Brook Charter, that neighborhood, the neighborhood I represent in particular, we're on these buses. You keep saying it's environmental justice. You're saying it's about black and brown. Let's get room packed with black and brown folks who are on the buses as well. That's also important. So thank everyone for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Representative Holmes, and thanks everyone for coming tonight.